The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Okay, so we had a bunch of primaries yesterday, and here's the way I see that Bernie Sanders still could be the Democratic nominee for president. I'm kidding. Now, I'm not really going to do that. People have voted in California. They voted in New Jersey, a bunch of other states. Based on the results, Hillary Clinton has now claimed the Democratic Party's nomination. She is not going to be officially nominated until the DNC in July. She has not accrued the number of pledged delegates alone to secure the nomination. But at this point, very few people are questioning this. She is starting her national campaign against Donald Trump this week. Trump is shifting into his national campaign against her. Let's take a quick look at the results from yesterday in California. This was sort of Bernie's big hope, California, ultimately losing to Hillary Clinton by 13 percentage points, winning in Montana, losing badly in New Jersey by a 2-1 margin to Hillary Clinton. New Mexico, very close, but Hillary Clinton squeaking it out. And winning in North Dakota did Bernie Sanders big time. And then we have South Dakota, where Hillary Clinton won just barely, 51-49. We saw that in an average of polls going into California, Hillary Clinton was up by a couple points, ultimately winning by quite a bit. Were you surprised, Lewis, by the California results?
I thought Bernie would do a bit better. Yeah, a little bit surprised.
So what does this do to the delegate math? We will take a quick look at that. We are showing you pledged and separately estimated superdelegates here. Hillary Clinton at 2,184 pledged, 571 superdelegates, 2,755 total, nearly 400 delegates beyond the required 2,383. Bernie Sanders, no slouch, over 1,800 pledged delegates, 1,804. And with the 48 estimated superdelegates, 1,852 for Bernie Sanders. At this point, and this is at the bottom of this graphic, one of the key things is 45 total delegates remaining. Just Washington, D.C. is left to vote next Tuesday. And with that being said, this is basically done. So let's talk about Hillary Clinton, the Democratic nominee for president. I've said this before, and I will say it again. There's no better time to discuss it than now. I am against picking candidates based on gender. I don't look at a candidate and say, okay, here's the policies of candidate A, here's the policies of candidate B, and I want candidate A because candidate A is a woman. That is not how I vote. And in fact, I voted for Bernie Sanders here in Massachusetts. I believe that there is no doubt he is the more progressive candidate, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't deny or change the reality that this country has had hundreds of years of male presidents without even really a real female contender other than Hillary Clinton in 2008 running against President Obama in the Democratic primary and ultimately losing. This is a big deal. Hillary Clinton won. Think about what it means to women and what it would mean to have a woman president. I think of if my little sister, who's 12, if she had grown up 80 years ago or 60 years ago or 40 years ago, arguably even 20 years ago, the context would not be that it's totally practical and possible that the U.S. would have a female president. I mean, you had Geraldine Ferraro as the VP nominee in 1984, but there was no real context of, hey, women really can do anything and be president. I mean, yes, on paper they can, but there was no real possibility of that. There's no way to argue this is not a palpable difference for young women growing up today.
No doubt. It's something to be excited about for sure. I wish it was not Hillary Clinton, but nevertheless, it's important. But if I asked you, I don't know, let's say 15 years ago. Yeah. Maybe even 10 years ago.
Okay.
If you thought there would be a black male president or a female president first, what do you think you would have said?
I don't know. Hindsight is 2020.
I would have said a female president.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, in a sense, women make up a much higher percentage of the U.S. population than do black people. There's no doubt about that. And this is the meaning it has to me as someone who is male. I mean, Rachel, am I overstating the importance of this? And I know that you're a Bernie supporter also. This is who won. This is who we now have. Am I right in assigning this level of significance to the fact that there is a major party nominee that is a woman, politics aside?
Well, I think that a lot of people might argue on the side of Hillary saying that a male might not have had the personal.
Oops, actually, you know what?
Yeah,
That's
we haven't
totally
been
my
hearing
fault.
Rachel.
The mic was
Yeah.
off. My bad.
Okay.
My bad. Go ahead. Start over.
So I think that's someone who might argue on. I mean, I would agree. I wouldn't pick a candidate based on gender, but I think that some people who are arguing for the female candidate would say that a male might not have the personal experiences of societal prejudice and discrimination, and so that their plight might kind of not be as cognizant to follow women's reproductive rights, abortion, pregnancy leave, rape, and so on. And I don't really think anyone can use the argument that gender and politics aren't interlinked. So, but then again, on the flip side, I think someone would just as easily say, well, oh, maybe you can argue a woman is inherently more honest and ethical, and then they could slip up. I don't personally agree with that, but I have heard that argument before. So
yeah, I mean, those are very identity politics aligned arguments, right? And you could make the case, it sort of gets into like the scale of privilege / oppression, and like, okay, well, if you have a black male, is he more or less able to understand issues A, B, and C versus issues D, E, and F? I mean, I think that for me, the big difference is, and I'll open it to you guys to comment on this. There's a difference between choosing candidates based on sort of identifying traits that we can slice along gender or race or class or whatever. And by the way, we have two very, very wealthy nominees at this point. So that I could argue is going to be a bigger lens through which their candidacies will be affected. But in the end of it, we can still recognize the importance and the meaning of having members of certain oppressed groups or less privileged groups. I think that we can still separate the two.
Well, you're going to have strengths and weaknesses from any candidate on any number of issues. Having a woman, well, that makes things a bit more clear where her strengths might be in some areas. But yeah, the rich thing is an interesting aspect of this.
Rachel, is it interesting to you? I mean, for me, it's a sign of progress in a way, and I'm sort of looking for positives here because politically I don't agree with a lot of Hillary Clinton's ideas. If we can focus on the policy ideas of Hillary Clinton rather than the fact that she is a woman, is that in a sense a form of progress, right? That if it weren't a big deal that she was a woman, and this is the first major party nominee that is a woman, in a sense it would be a sign of progress, wouldn't it?
yeah, I mean, I definitely would agree with that. I think that in a sense, if we can remove any of those attributes of someone's sexuality, gender, race, et cetera, and just look at them solely for their policies and opinions and thoughts and how they're going to seemingly conduct themselves in office, I think that would definitely be a sign of progression. But I don't know if we've 100% come to that point yet.
No, I think we definitely haven't. There's no doubt about that. I want to talk about how things are not all bright and shiny for Donald Trump. He did win 5 primaries yesterday on the Republican side, but my curiosity yesterday was how well will Donald Trump do in these primaries, given that he is unopposed? There is no one left running against Donald Trump. And it's true that once it's sort of been decided, turnout might be expectedly low. He's not running against anybody anymore. But how well does Trump do? And I was looking for the number 80%. Could Trump achieve 80% support in yesterday's primaries, given that he was running against nobody? And what's amazing is that in 4 of yesterday's 5 Republican primaries, Trump did not get 80% support. And when he did, it was just barely. Let's look at the results. Yesterday in California, running against no one, mind you, Donald Trump had 75% of the vote. In Montana, running against no one, Donald Trump had just under 74% of the vote. In New Mexico, 70%. And in South Dakota, 67% of the vote. Only in New Jersey, and just barely, Donald Trump achieved 80.6% of the vote. No one else on the ballot. And these are primary voters. And 20% don't vote for you. In New Jersey, he had support from Chris Christie. He has properties and businesses in New Jersey. It's the neighbor state to his home state of New York. And he still barely made it. This is not a good sign for Trump for the national election. That we say, I'm the only person running, and 1 out of 5 did not vote for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't be voting at all if I were voting in the Republican primary at this
Right.
point.
So that goes to the point exactly. If you just don't want Trump and you're a Republican primary voter or potential, he's already the nominee. You can just stay home. 20% of people, presumably being aware of the fact that Trump is the presumptive nominee,
still went out.
Still went out and voted for someone else.
Yes. Well, if you feel strongly about it, that's fine. If you feel you're making a statement, but I don't know. We know what his support looks like overall.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure what these numbers mean, other than maybe just being a bit interesting.
Well, I think it's not a good sign for the national election. I really do. And we're going to start looking at that picture in a week or two. I expect Trump to drop in the national polls as a result of the mistakes he's made over the last week, and we'll talk about some of those. But really, it's going to come down to state by state. And if you look at some of that's why I think it matters, Lewis. If you look at some of the states where unopposed, Trump did not get even 4/5 of the vote, the swing states are going to decide this election. That's the way we're going to look at it. And I believe this is a bad sign for Trump.
I think one of the most important statistics of this general election will be how many people are just abstaining from voting altogether.
Yeah. Well, when you have two of the most disliked presidential nominees, political candidates as presidential nominees for a very, very long time in Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, I can't imagine that will necessarily create turnout, except for the fact that high unfavorability can bring people out voting against.
Against both, that goes both ways, though.
Yes, it can go both ways, no doubt about it. But it could be a factor that just gets people out. Well, I don't know. We will track that data. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. Lewis is on Twitter at Lewis Motamedy. We'll take a break and be back with more.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Hermosa Farca. Thank you so much for signing up at davidpakman.com/membership. This is viewer-supported media. Check it out. Sign up. Okay, Lewis, we have a real classic idea in this week's Hatriot Mail. But first, I'll remind you what Hatriot Mail is.
If Ayn Rand and Ronald Reagan had a baby and suckled that child off the teat of liberty, its cries would sound a little something like Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
So Hatriot Mail doesn't often deal with science or even retrograde misunderstandings of science, but that's exactly what the subject matter is this week. Take a listen to this.
If you don't believe in God, where is your moral barometer? It comes from being a human being, understanding right from wrong and doing unto others as I would have them do unto me, you moronic fool. If we evolved from monkeys, why do we still have monkeys? Because you don't understand evolution, you stupid shithead.
This is a common retrograde, anti-science, right-wing religious idea. If humans descended from monkeys, as is often asked, how come we still have monkeys? It is one of the most frequently asked questions about evolution. Many creationists say this. They don't really care about the answer, but it could also be asked innocently, right? I mean, I don't get it. If we descended from monkeys, how is it that we still have monkeys? People don't seem to get sometimes that evolution is not a process where species universally sort of like progress up a ladder. Humans are not descended from any modern species of monkey. Both monkeys and humans have evolved from some long extinct ancestor that predates both modern monkeys and modern humans. And although this, if we saw that species today, it would be considered a monkey. it's not a living species of monkey. I mean, in simple terms, monkeys and humans share a common ancestor, which some estimate evolved around 25 million years ago. And this seems to be, so many creationists point to this as some kind of gotcha. I got you. Monkeys and humans both still exist. Therefore, God created everything.
Yes. They don't want to look up the science. They don't want to know. And also the idea that if you don't believe in God, you have no moral compass.
Right.
As if someone who is never told about God can't possibly be a good person. That idea, I think most people would agree with, sounds pretty stupid.
Along the same lines, if dogs are domesticated or evolved from wolves, how come there are still wolves? It's not the exact same thing, but it should at least get you thinking about the fact that monkeys existing today doesn't prove or disprove anything in particular about evolution, but in particular, it doesn't disprove that evolution exists. Okay, I mentioned yesterday that I had 13 of these half-price memberships remaining. We have this very generous, longtime supporter of the show based in New York City who every once in a while offers to pay for half of a bunch of people's memberships. In this particular case, he offered to pay for 20 memberships. So instead of $60, 20 people could sign up for just $30. Yesterday, I told you we had 13 of those left. We now have only 8 of those left. If you want one of these, just email me, david@davidpakman.com, or go to our website, davidpakman.com, and click on Contact Us. Say, I'd like one of those 8 remaining memberships, and first come, first served. I assume, Lewis, and I know you've run a number of analyses on this, we expect these will be gone in probably a couple days.
Hotcakes, like they say. Hotcakes, Dave.
And I will remind you, we are also taking live calls on the show Thursday, tomorrow, June 9th, 1:15 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to call, all topics are on the table, 617-830-4750. What I recommend, Lewis, and I know you're against keeping any kind of schedule, I recommend just putting something in your calendar which says it'll go off at 1:15 and it says, hey, David Pakman Show's taking calls right now.
In your Hatriot Mail calendar.
Right, in your Hatriot, that would be the logical place to put it. Why are you against, by the way, keeping like a calendar per se?
I'm not against it at all. It just, when for such a long time it was never part of your routine.
Yeah.
It's maybe not the easiest thing to make it routine, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great assessment. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. Let's talk about what's going on in New York State. A Democratic New York Governor, Andrew Cuomo, has signed an executive order against the BDS movement. That's this movement that tries to delegitimize Israel and harm Israel economically with the eventual goal, supposedly, of bringing about political change. It calls for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions against and of Israel and Israeli companies. And Andrew Cuomo has passed an executive order in New York State barring the state of New York from doing business with entities that back the BDS movement. It's sort of a BDS of BDS. Here's just a little bit of Andrew Cuomo announcing this.
Today I'm going to sign an executive order that says very clearly we are against the BDS movement, and it's very simple. If you boycott against Israel, New York will boycott you. If you divert revenues from Israel, New York will divert revenues from you. If you sanction Israel, New York will sanction you. Period.
The legislature has also passed a similar measure, and this will extend the reach of Governor Cuomo's order to the state pension fund, and that's where the real money is. There are foreign banks that serve BDS backing enterprises, and they do business with firms that handle the New York retirement system's investments. And the prospect of losing those investments could actually have a pretty significant impact, could actually get some of those firms to sever ties with offending banks. Now, the BDSers will tell you that this is just a movement, which is just, it's a peace movement. It's meant to achieve social change, etc. I'm unquestionably against the BDS movement. BDSers will tell you when they're asked, do you believe that Israel should exist as a Jewish state? They say, oh, BDS doesn't take a position on two-state versus one-state solution. BDS just doesn't comment on that. And that is hugely misleading. Top BDS supporter Omar Barghouti has made many statements to this effect, including, quote, the one-state solution means a unitary state where by definition Jews will be a minority. So in practice, you can say we don't take a political position, but if you simply allow anyone to come into Israel, period, it will not be a Jewish state. It is a one-state solution, and it is effectively the end of Israel as a safe haven for Jews. But forget about that, because maybe you like that idea, right? There are those who say that what Andrew Cuomo is doing is anti-free speech. I got emails from people, Lewis, saying, "Oh, look at Andrew Cuomo in New York by sanctioning the sanctioners, by boycotting the BDS movement. He is limiting the free speech of those who want to boycott Israel." This is when so-called liberals sound like right-wingers to me. The authoritarianism comes out. First of all, no one is prevented from saying anything by Andrew Cuomo's executive order, but let's put that aside for a second. This critique reminds me of when North Carolina passed that horrible anti-transgender bathroom law, and Andrew Cuomo said the state of New York is banning official travel to North Carolina for political reasons. It was the right-wingers saying this is a violation of free speech. The liberals didn't, because I guess they agreed with the politics of it. Now that it's the same guy, it's still Andrew Cuomo saying, hey, we are against BDS. All of a sudden, those left-wingers sound like the same conservatives saying this is a restriction on free speech. It is a huge double standard.
That hypocrisy is happening. What I find, this is just a highly, highly unusual order to be signed into law, right? I mean,
in the same way that saying we're not going to do any official travel to North Carolina, I mean, how much official travel is really done by New York to North Carolina?
Yeah, but this is a little bit different because official travel to North Carolina is pretty clear cut what that is. But when it comes to a person who supports BDS, an organization that supports BDS, or even a group that label themselves as BDS, I mean, it seems a little bit arbitrary, as to what that might be. How do you legally define what that is? It's just kind of messy.
There are some sort of logistical questions that you bring up that are valid, but there's no doubt that the critique that this is anti-free speech, but criticizing the free speech of North Carolina to pass the laws they want with regard to transgender bathrooms is fine. There's a definite double standard there. And as a sort of quick refresher, we've talked about this more. I've talked about BDS before. For those who want an overview of why I am against this movement, even if you're against Israel's current right-wing government led by Benjamin Netanyahu, as I am, even if you're against Israeli settlements, as I am, the BDS movement hurts the wrong people. It hurts Palestinian workers who will lose their jobs if these economic sanctions are directed against Israeli firms that employ them. BDS is essentially a propaganda war. It has zero chance of ever bringing peace. And whether or not BDS is inherently anti-Semitic is sort of irrelevant because across the U.S., and particularly on college campuses, anti-Semitic beliefs are emboldened by BDS. The leaders of the BDS movement will never be satisfied with any kind of two-state solution that is acceptable to Israel, and there is just no chance that anything else has a real possibility of bringing peace. Even Norman Finkelstein and Noam Chomsky, although conceptually they have no problem with the boycotting of Israel, have both said this is not a path forward that is really going to achieve change. So we've talked about that more extensively, Lewis. That is just a quick overview, but very, very interesting what is happening in New York State. We will take a break. After the break, speaking of North Carolina's transgender bathroom law, I will interview a transgender woman who is going to tell us about the fantasy world you have to be living in to think that any of these trans bathroom bills make any sense whatsoever.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Valerie Jackson, who's a 30-year-old transgender woman living in Dallas, Texas. We are going to talk about some of the recent bathroom bills. We've seen them in North Carolina and other states, and really try to figure out the real world implications, but also absurdity of some of these laws. Valerie, it's great to speak to you. To sort of get us into this conversation, first of all, have you ever been confronted when using the women's restroom in some way?
No, I've never been confronted. I have friends that have, but I have personally not.
Do you imagine that if you were to follow the letter of some of these laws that we've seen passed, which say individuals must use the bathroom that corresponds with the sex listed on the birth certificate, if you were to do that, do you think that that would really be the sort of smooth situation that many people who are proponents of these laws in states like North Carolina say it would be? Or is that likely to cause more of a commotion than you doing what it is that you have been doing, which is using the bathroom that corresponds to your gender identity?
No, it would cause all kinds of problems because people tell me that I'm not the person that they're worried about. They're not worried about actual transgender women using the restroom. But the way that the law is written, I would be forced to use the men's room, and I would definitely be questioned and harassed and all kinds of issues, not just from me, but on the other side of it with trans men. Can you imagine like big, hairy, burly men, muscly men that were born female that are now trans men living their life as men trying to access the women's restroom? It would be a catastrophe.
Yeah, and it seems like this conversation is just totally missing from the discussions that we see, particularly in corporate media, about this issue, which is, okay, let's grant for a second we have a law like the one that we see in North Carolina, HB2, and everybody follows it to the letter. There's been really no substantive discussion in corporate media about the fact that there's a whole other set of problems that would cause, and you're pointing out one of them. I mean, is this, in the conversations you've had with people, is that narrative missing because people are aware of it and they see it as a sort of liability when supporting these laws? Or is it that nobody's considered this?
I think for whatever reason, the focus seems to be more on trans women. I think there's a mismatch between the people that are trying to pass these laws are obviously doing it for discriminatory reasons, but coming up with some other reason and then trying to get the public to then accept that as the real reason. The problem is that solution doesn't match a problem that exists.
Well, along those lines, I mean, are there, we hear, you mentioned this statement, right? Which is, Valerie, you're not the problem because you're legitimately a transgender woman. But what we worry about is, for example, like former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee said, if when I was a kid in high school, I could have just said, hey, I am a woman, to go check out girls in the girls' locker room, I would have done it. That's the scenario that's proposed to people, and it brings up these images of the dangerous male predator getting into the women's bathroom. But is that based in reality? I mean, do these laws even prevent that from being a possibility?
No, and I mean, people go to locker rooms, and I don't know which locker rooms they're using, but I know a lot of locker rooms have privacy within their own gender-specific locker rooms. Everyone's proposing a third bathroom, but I just don't think that's realistic. I think they just need to make locker rooms more private. But
Yeah.
again, with the whole, oh, you know, this is going to be a loophole for men to access a restroom, adding another layer of restriction for predators isn't going to stop them. It's already illegal for men to use the women's restroom or to gain access and cause any type of illegal behavior. So adding a secondary thing isn't really going to correct anything. If they're really concerned about predators in restrooms, they need to be attacking it at a different angle than this.
Can you address the fear-mongering around, more generally, the concept of pretending to be trans? I mean, is that it in your life? Have you heard of any examples of someone doing that other than the ones we've seen over the last 6 months, which are just sort of political statements meant to prove some kind of point, which usually goes horribly wrong, by the way, and ends in people getting arrested? Is this something that even exists within the trans community, that you hear of people pretending to be trans?
No, I mean, like I've said many times before, that's a lot of work for a guy to put on a dress, pretend that he's a woman that day, and then try to gain access to a women's restroom in a public space. Usually, if somebody's going to be a victim of sexual assault, it's going to be someone close to them that they trust in a safe spot, not in some public area where they're going to have to put on a dress and a wig to go into a women's restroom. It just doesn't happen.
Can you talk about the importance of looking at birth certificate versus driver's license? Because there's a pretty good case to be made that even including birth certificate in this discussion is just sort of a very forced way to make this actually about something else, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, because a lot of times trans people can amend their birth certificates depending on the state where they live to reflect their true gender. But they're writing the law in a way that's saying it's based on your original birth certificate. Well, if you're not really concerned about actual trans people and you're trying to protect, everyone as much as you can, then I don't understand why they're not using the driver's license requirement, or saying that you have to have medical documentation to where if you feel you're going to be questioned in a restroom, you have that on you. I remember when I first started transitioning several years ago, and my gender therapist actually gave me what was called walking papers, which I didn't have my name or gender or anything changed, but it did say that, hey, this person's under care for medical transition. So if it's really not discriminatory, why aren't you making it easier on trans people?
Can you talk a little bit about the absurdity of imagining how some of these laws would be enforced? I mean, I've sort of sat and thought about, okay, let's for a second say, yeah, fine, this is the law. HB2 is going to be followed literally now. How is this something that could even realistically be enforced? I mean, does it require people to carry their birth certificates when they want to go into a public bathroom? Or imagine being in a department store. Will there be somebody checking genitalia? I mean, I truly don't understand how this could even be enforced.
Yeah, it's absurd to think that there's going to be a bathroom police. I think it's more of a matter of passing, and it's a matter of, well, if you're questionable, then we're going to question you. If you don't fit what we think is a masculine man or a female, feminine woman, then you're going to be questioned. And that can not only happen to trans people that may not pass as the gender they're trying to represent and show that they are, but it also, it raises problems for people that just might be a little more masculine than the average female, or a little bit more feminine than the average male. And that opens up harassment for those individuals that aren't even trans.
That actually happened. I mean, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before. There's a story of a woman in a Walmart who had actually, she either had shaved her head or had a very short haircut, because she had actually donated her hair for people who lost their hair because of chemotherapy. And someone in the Walmart bathroom said something along the lines of, "You're disgusting and you shouldn't be here." And there was nothing at all transgender about this individual.
And I know somebody here locally that's the same way, and she's actually been physically assaulted by police and removed from a women's restroom because of it until proven otherwise. So it's definitely an issue, and I think talking about it right now and trying to, again, find a solution to a problem that doesn't exist is only further perpetuating that. It's only, giving maybe these predators ideas. It's only further harassing people, further causing more problems. I just think that it's not been a problem. Trans people have been using the bathroom that they associate with for years, and there hasn't been an issue. So why are we bringing it up now, and why are we now making it a problem? I think it's just a huge political move. They also lost the same-sex marriage, issue, and I think that they're just attacking one of the other letters in LGBT now.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that Supreme Court decision last summer has unleashed not only the anti-trans movement to a greater degree than we've seen it, but also the so-called religious freedom movement and fighting along those lines. Last thing, you mentioned at the beginning that while you haven't been confronted when using the women's restroom, that people who have. Can you give us just a couple data points of sort of how those confrontations have happened, or what the dynamics were?
Well, what I've known is some very masculine lesbian women friends of mine that have entered a restroom, and even in the most forward-thinking liberal areas like New York City, and I've gone into a restroom and somebody has reported them, and then police have questioned them only for them to say, no, I am a woman and I do belong in this restroom, but then still to be argued with, physically removed. And then a lot of times once they present some type of documentation like a driver's license, then they're still questioned. And I know one instance where a male police officer did in fact physically and inappropriately touch this woman in an area just to make sure that she was in fact didn't have something that shouldn't be there according to him. So yeah, it's been it seems like a regular thing according to her when she's told me this story recently.
Stunning, stunning. I mean, when you think about the political time in terms of legislators and by virtue of that taxpayer money, police, law enforcement time that is going into this, it is truly, truly stunning. Valerie Jackson joining me today from Dallas, Texas. Can't thank you enough for sharing your story.
You're welcome, David. Thank you for having me.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I was watching CNN yesterday, and during the 11 a.m. Eastern news hour, they brought on Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin to talk about Donald Trump's comments about a judge not being able to do their job because the judge's parents are Mexican. This is related to that Trump University fraud case. This interview happened after Republican Speaker of the House Paul Ryan already said Trump's comments are just flat out racist. Brace yourselves. This is really, really good. I've watched this thing 3 times now. I don't understand what Lee Zeldin is talking about. The linguistic acrobatics he's going through to try to explain why, even though what Trump said is racist, he still supports Trump. It's just amazing. So first, here's Lee Zeldin admitting, yes, there's no doubt that what Donald Trump said is racist. Take a look.
Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, the senior elected official of your party right now, says that Donald Trump made a comment that is the textbook definition of a racist comment. Do you agree?
Well, the way I subjectively define racism, I agree as well. I think that Mr. Trump made a regrettable mistake with his statement. I believe that it's a regrettable legal strategy. He's trying to win a case.
So yeah, this fits the definition, the dictionary definition of racism. We all agree it's racist, period. So then, do you still support Trump? Are you saying, oh yeah, this is definitely racist, but I still support the guy making the racist statements? Let's get that answer from Lee Zeldin.
Are you still comfortable supporting him?
Quite frankly, the policies that I have seen from the Democratic Party when you're micro-targeting a community and you are putting there are blacks together and Hispanics together and certain economic messages and positions on issues. Quite frankly, with the way I define racism, I see it a lot in policies and statements that has taken place. I've been in Congress for 18 months. I was in the New York State Senate for 4, and I think
I'm not saying are you now voting for Hillary Clinton, but are you still endorsing Donald Trump if you think he's engaging in racism?
Yes, it's Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, and it's a no-brainer between the two of them.
Are you essentially saying that, yes, he's a racist, but he's our racist?
So are you supporting the racist? Well, Democrats are micro-targeting. That's the answer to, are you supporting the guy you admit is a racist? So then there's a follow-up, and then it gets even better.
I think that Donald Trump, as far as his character goes, he isn't making that statement because he feels like he is superior because, he is white and the judge is Mexican. I don't believe he's making that statement because internally, he feels like he is of a superior race. I mean, there is...
Right, but is a little bit racist okay?
Well, being racist at no one with any policy, with any statement, I quite frankly think that whether it is people who are running for president of the United States, people who have been in that position, people who are in Congress and state legislators, people running for office, the American public, that we all can do a lot better in the way we handle these issues.
What would you call someone who makes racist statements?
Does anybody understand what this guy is saying? So he's saying Trump did say something racist, but he didn't make the racist statement because he believes his race is better than Mexicans. I guess it's just like if you imagine zero, right? It's not that Trump thinks he being white is at a 10 and Mexicans are at a 4 because they're Mexican. He thinks that as a white guy, he's at a 0, but Mexicans are just worse. They're at like a -4. I mean, the logic, I can't follow the logic here.
When anytime someone starts saying, I quite honestly believe that no matter who you are, and you start naming positions and people, that's really bad. You know they're trying, they're really struggling at that point.
I have another section of this, and it's all about whether Lee Zeldin feels that Trump is racist.
How would you characterize
Everyone calls him a racist.
So if Donald Trump is making racist statements, you're saying he's a racist?
Well, so again, if he internally felt superior because he is white and he's not Hispanic, if he felt superior because he was white and he wasn't black, or he was Christian and not Jewish. I mean, you could start getting into the weeds, internally as far as a person's character goes. But quite frankly, what I have seen through the years is an offensive micro-targeting on policy.
And there he goes again with the mic. So I think the point is, Donald Trump saying racist things is regrettable. But because Lee Zeldin doesn't know for sure that these racist beliefs are deeply and internally held by Donald Trump, he's giving him the benefit of the doubt. We can ignore the things Trump says because we can't know for sure if deep down in his head he's actually a racist.
What is even the point? I mean, why don't you just say, yeah, Donald Trump says some stupid things, but it's his policies that I support, and to me that's more important. I don't think people would be angry at this guy for saying that. I mean, that's really what is going on here. So
it would at least be more coherent, you're saying. If
well,
not admirable.
Clarity and coherence and continuity would be great when anyone is talking, yeah.
And then the cherry on top, what better way to distract from all of this than to just blame Obama for being racist?
Right, but here's the thing.
The President of the United States
don't you judge character on people's words? Isn't that the only thing isn't that one of the only things you have to judge a presidential candidate on
I believe
what
that
they believe inside?
There's more than just words to define a person. And by the way, aside from words, there's a whole lot more to define everyone. But you can easily argue that the President of the United States is a racist with his policies and his rhetoric. But you could go back, presidents.
But you're not arguing that. Just to be clear, you're not arguing as racist.
I'm not here to call. My purpose here isn't to just go through the list and call everyone a racist.
No, just President Obama.
Yeah.
So this is just insane. I mean, you hear about the just blame Obama for anything thing, and that actually happening. A conversation about whether you were voting for the guy you admit is a racist, Donald Trump. Well, listen, Obama's actually the racist. What Obama has to do with any of this, I have no idea. Okay, I told you that running unopposed in yesterday's primaries, Donald Trump failed to get 80% of the vote in 4 of 5 primaries. And there's another problem for Donald Trump. Some major Republican elected officials are coming out and saying, we're not going to be voting for Donald Trump. I'll start with Illinois Republican Senator Mark Kirk, who said, no, I'm just not voting for Donald Trump. He said, I have spent my life building bridges and tearing down barriers, not building walls. That's why I find Donald Trump's belief that an American-born judge of Mexican descent is incapable of fairly presiding over his case is not only dead wrong, it is un-American. And then he tweeted the following about Donald Trump. Given my military experience, Donald Trump does not have the temperament to command our military or our nuclear arsenal. Then we go to Republican Nevada Governor Brian Sandoval, very popular mainstream Republican. He says it's not at all clear that he will be voting for Donald Trump in November. He gave an interview to the Las Vegas Review-Journal. He was asked about this. He said his vote for Trump is not for sure. Republican Senator from Arizona Jeff Flake said yesterday, as of now, unless he changes significantly, I can't see myself voting for Donald Trump. And Republican Governor Charlie Baker here in Massachusetts said that he will not back Donald Trump. That was back in March. I don't believe that has changed since. Some of these Republicans will ultimately acquiesce and vote for Trump in the same way that Paul Ryan has, in spite of still stating that Donald Trump is saying racist things. He's supporting him. Many of these Republicans will ultimately support Trump. But when mainstream Republican senators and governors are saying either I don't know that I'm going to support Trump or I definitely won't, this is a unique situation, isn't it?
It's really bad for Trump. Yeah, I guess it's a unique situation. I I don't know what this means for the general election, but we certainly aren't going to hear them come out and support Hillary Clinton.
No, well, that's the problem, right? Because if you follow this to its logical conclusion, what do they do in November? They're not going to vote for Hillary. If they vote for a third party candidate, then they are going to just help Hillary Clinton. And if they don't vote at all, just really doesn't look good unless it's truly a protest vote and they can couch it in some PR-friendly way.
You might just want to say this for your own benefit. I mean, it's that might be the right move here, right? Further down the road, looking at future elections.
Yeah, because we saw one of the, I forget who it was, I have the story for tomorrow, the one congressperson primary candidate endorsed by Trump lost. It's really not looking good for what's going on down ballot for Republicans. We have a voicemail number. The number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a voicemail I received about the Democratic primary.
Hey, David, this is Ken from Southern California. I'm going to take a little issue with the thing Bernie Sanders is putting out here about the super delegates not having voted yet. Bob Shrum or somebody like that on MSNBC brought this point up. Neither have the pledged delegates voted yet. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, which is nobody has actually voted, the pledged delegates nor the super delegates. The difference is the pledged delegates are presumably bound to vote in a particular way, so there is a difference, but point taken nonetheless. On today's bonus show, a monkey causes a nationwide blackout in Kenya. Transgender porn is very popular with heterosexual men, and specifically heterosexual men in Wyoming, who are presumably more conservative than liberal. And a new study purports to say, or reports claim that a new study says being a vegetarian can kill you, but apparently media sources reporting on that don't actually understand what the studies say. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Remember, we have these 8 half-price memberships remaining. Email me if you want one, david@davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.